All members of council are present and accounted for, except for Mayor Pro Tem Merkel and Councilman Will. As always, we begin our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're able, please stand and join us. The first workshop item will be the Alpharetta Stormwater Management Program, so I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Drinker and Mr. Sisevich.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. If you don't mind, I'm going to do this from here because I'm still running systems, so sorry about that. But thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you tonight about this item. As you know, we've been working on updating stormwater policies and ideas for how we can better manage stormwater throughout the city. A lot of that came about as we started seeing redevelopment activity in some of our older neighborhoods that were developed using stormwater practices from the 50s and 60s, which obviously are significantly different from what we see today. So the policies we'll be talking about tonight are ones that we've developed as we've discussed stormwater issues with a variety of neighborhoods and residents, collecting ideas and then working with our consultants on best practices that we can adapt to best meet the needs of the city of Alpharetta. Since we put this particular document together, we have put that in front of several neighborhoods and resident groups to get feedback and made some adjustments based on that feedback. Pete will present all of that tonight, and at this point, I'll turn it over to him.
There we go. That's on. Is that working now? All right, wonderful. And it's breaking down of multiple different sections. Going through it's asset management, regulatory compliance, flooding, private pond inspections, stream bank erosion control, and public education outreach. I want to stress and to everybody that there is not a silver bullet to this stormwater challenge that we're all facing around the region. It is not a one solution is going to change everything, fix everything. It's lots of little pieces together that's going to work out together, from working with HOAs, from working with the private entities, as well as what we can do on our own infrastructure. And so what we went through with our consultant down each of these areas, we looked at our asset management, and we had our consultant who works with other municipalities to compare us to those municipalities. And going through there's some areas of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we're not recommending one over another. There could be some other high points that you could see or some other areas that we could focus on. So really what I'm looking for tonight is making sure that we're on the right path. There's something that you have heard from the citizens that you'd like us to pursue deeper or more inclined to do so and making it happen. We have, since this has been developed, we have implemented a string bank erosion stabilization project over in Wills Park. And it has lots of the components of this document embedded in that landscaping improvement, string bank improvement project, from live staking to erosion control to plantings of different elements. So going through the asset management, every 5 years we're required by the state to inspect all of our stormwater pipes and catch basins. And our area is broken into 5 quadrants, our city. And we're going through it, and one of the attachments was the, should have it here, because I thought I did. Here we go. And so this is the area that we're working in right now, the section right here, section B. And then we inspect our consultant inspects all the pipes, all the structures. We lift the manholes, see what's going on. We take pictures. From those inspections, we do get some critical needs that to be taken care of immediately. In other areas, we just enter into our work order system as we go through. This area's been going, we've been doing this for the last 10 plus years. It's been going very well. We've been catching things. We've been proactive in some cases, as well as it's put us on a priority program to fix some other areas. The key thing to all this is our GIS system, and that is the one area where we're trying to improve more with our graphic information system, working with community development to get the private land development as-built embedded into our GIS mapping system, because the crews know what's in the GIS system. So if there's an issue that's out in the field, they go out there to that asset, they identify it, they look at, they research it, and see what's going on. So working with community development more would help us out there. We've also noticed a significant cost increase in cured in place pipelining. The material cost has skyrocketed. So we're also pursuing other opportunities there to control costs, to continue working on repairing our pipes, but not replacing them if they don't need to be, but finding other methodologies that are not as invasive to the subdivisions and the property owners. Because a lot of these pipes are in between two homes. There's a pipe that also goes off the street, in between two lots. We don't want to tear up fencing. We don't want to do all that stuff. But so a cured in-place lining helps out significantly to expedite all that. Regulatory compliance. We're going to do permit at the end of this year, beginning of next year, regarding our sampling requirements. I won't spend too much time on that, but long story short, what we're trying to do is be more efficient. Do what we need to do to meet the requirements, do what we need to do to help out the citizens, but then spend more time in other areas if we can. So if they lack some of the permitting sampling requirements, we're going to take advantage of that so we can spend time in the field solving additional problems. Private pond inspections have been going on for quite some time. I would love to say that we have the staff to inspect every single private pond in the community, go through everything and do it. We just don't. We rely on HOAs to notify us if there is an issue. We'll do an inspection for them. We rely on the HOAs and the private communities, the builders, to adequately maintain their ponds like need to be. Now, pond maintenance today is, for a new development, is completely different than pond maintenance from a pond 20 years ago. They're much larger, they're much more intuitive, there's much more landscaping, and there's already, what helps us out, what's the word I'm looking for here? An agreement in place for them to take care of those ponds, where 25 years ago, we did not have that in place. So we're having to blend what we do today with what was built 25 years ago and try and mesh it together for compliance. But the HOAs have been working with us. When we reach out to them, they're very, very receptive. We're not here to take anybody's bank account away and have them fixing these ponds. We work on a program with them, and slowly, methodically, every little bit helps us out downstream. So they're improving nicely. Flooding's a big one, especially in certain areas of the city. Some properties were built in the floodplain way back ago. There's not much we can do about that. But what we can do, and we've done a very good job of mapping the 100+ acre basins, if we are able to find resources and map less than 100 acres and get more defined areas for flooding where we know they could occur, what that flood elevation will be, that will help us out long term. It's not a priority in the sense of we need to do that today, right now, but it's one of those nice things to have. So we can fine tune and determine what is that flood elevation for that area in a smaller scale instead of looking at it from a larger scale. Now the big one that we've been hearing about, I've been here 19 years, I've been hearing it for all 19 years, is stream bank going away, the erosion control. And we've been trying many different methods and methodologies and tried riprap. I'd love this, it's a short-term solution. It does not stay there long-term, unfortunately. What has been working very well for us is doing the willow stakes. And we put this into the Web Bridge project by the tennis courts and basketball court, where basically it's live willow stakes going in the ground, and they catch root, and they stabilize the bank through the roots. You will notice when you walk around Morgan's Greenway that a lot of these trees, you just see all their roots embedded into the stream bank, but the tree is just fine, it's secure, it's stable, the bank is stabilized. It's the same practice. So if we could stabilize the stream banks with roots, with some other system other than riprap, A, it looks better, B, it lasts longer, and C, it's a lot cheaper. And so we're talking about trying to do some grant programs, trying to do some educational outreach with the community on figuring out how best to educate these private property owners, because the majority of our issues are on private property. And that is ultimately the biggest challenge we face in the department. what people want us to fix and what they have issues with are on their private property. There are no easements established for us to work in there. Not saying we can't get easements and all that, but nothing's been established. So, and that leads us to the last one is the public education outreach. Individuals are wanting to work with us. They are looking for ideas, are looking for help. We're doing what we can from that nature, from James putting out social media blasts to Terry Porter working with the different communities, as well as the NRC is getting attention to this as well. So it's going back to not one size, not fits all, not a silver bullet. It's all these little pieces together that we're looking to implement. Some do cost resources. The $4 million is allocated every year. Those funds are going to go to use very, very well. We have a long list of projects that are in the queue, getting ready to go, from pipelining to pipe replacement to catch basins. We had a sinkhole on Red Oak Lane due to a structure failing. And thank you, C-Click Fix. Picture came in, we saw a little dimple. The individual texted us the next day and said, we have a hole now. And long story short, a structure collapsed, which then broke the pipe in half, and the soil went into the pipe and caused a sinkhole, and had fixed about 30 feet of pipe and 2 structures. So yeah, it's things like that happen quickly, and that's why these inspections are so important for us to catch things that occur on North Point Parkway or Windward Parkway, because Red Oak Lane is a cul-de-sac subdivision. If this would happen on North Point Parkway or Windward Parkway, it'd be a whole different type of discussion happening in front of you. So with that, open to any comments, concerns, things that we might have not spent enough time on, or areas you want us to spend, look into more in depth.
Councilman Hypes.
Pete, very much appreciate bringing this to us. It was very timely. I think we've talked about this from time to time related to projects, and I know that you all have been working on this to organize your thoughts and our approach. With respect to not pipes, but stormwater streams, et cetera, is there any empirical evidence that the water is rising or it's any worse? Do we have measurements and data to say that there is a progression or there is no progression?
We don't have any real-time data collected today. And that was one of our ideas, was to put in some stream flow monitoring devices in different areas of the city to capture such data, to figure out. We have some elevation marks that we go for that we know about, off of Killenbridge Road, for example. But there's no stream flow data that we have right now, other than that Killenbridge Road testing area. Now, what we have noticed is waterways are always moving. They're always changing. Where it went today, it's zigging. Tomorrow it's going to zag. When does it zag? Nobody knows. So it's not a pristine, stereotypical stream, if you want to call it. But I do believe that what you have seen is, with the new developments coming in, they're putting in the stormwater retention. They're also doing percolation into the ground. So you are seeing a steady improvement compared to the older communities. I want to go in older communities. I'm just talking 25 years ago. Detention 15 years ago was minimal compared to what it is now. When I started my career, 6,000 cubic feet per acre was your typical standard volume measurement. Now you're at 18,000 cubic feet, 15,000 in some cases. So it's gone up considerably what is required. Longer ago are the days of doing your detention in a parking lot and just cutting out a little notch in the curb for the water to flow through.
With the water that's open and surface, not the pipes, anything man-made, it's dust to dust at some point, maybe 1,000 years, maybe 10 years, but it's going to deteriorate. But as to the open part, in terms of formulating a response and pursuing a remedy, I want to know what the problem is if we're ever able to figure that out. And we had this come up, I think I remember which neighborhood it is, but that's irrelevant. I don't want to get into naming neighborhoods, where the owners and the newer owners felt like the water was higher, but we seem to have had, for that neighborhood, some evidence that no, it's really not higher. They were just experiencing high water because they had moved in there. So, you know,
We'll look into it for sure.
Yeah.
And we're looking into the data, the instruments that we can to tie them into our catch basin system so that we can actually capture what's going on. I mean, we had some interesting ones where the Boise detention pond, we noticed had an orifice. The pond was higher than we thought the elevation should be, and lo and behold, someone decided to fill in the bottom orifice with concrete, and so the pond was higher up. So what happened is then it sounds like a great idea. However, on a slower, like a 2-year storm or a 5-year storm event, it was going over the overflow where it shouldn't have. So you were getting more water downstream. Am I saying that was an erosion issue causing anything? No, but it wouldn't have helped if it was long-term.
And last question, comment. We're always going to go through cycles of wet weather and dry weather. I remember well when, 2006 to 2008 or 9, Jason and I were in Rotary together. The Lake Lanier got down to the spill level.
Oh, yeah.
And it didn't rain. It just didn't rain for a couple of years, you know. And so you would have one sort of data there in terms of heights of streams, et cetera. And then you have, exceptionally wet weather. And in order to know what we're dealing with, I would like to know if there's any way to factor that in, or maybe we just plan for the worst and plan what our contingencies are in wet weather, so to speak.
So we do know that the intensity of the storms have increased. So instead of a storm or raining all day and getting 2 inches, it's raining 6 hours and we're getting 2 inches. So that is a harder solution, hard problem to solve. Because the water is not infiltrating the ground as long as it should. It's not a slow, methodical storm. It's occurring all at once. Our catch basin system is designed for a 25-year storm. So what happened a couple of Septembers ago was close to a 500-year storm. That is when Academy Street flooded, which we've never seen before. South Lake Drive flooded, which has not really happened that we've seen of that nature. So our challenges as engineers is trying to figure out what can we do for these quicker storm events that are dumping a lot of water compared to storm events dumping the same amount of water over a longer period of time. So,
and while we're being very serious about addressing the issue, I don't want to price out the ability of folks to build a home in Alpharetta, because I get feedback. You asked about feedback. I get feedback from people who are building houses. Just an owner hires a contractor, but some of the solutions that we're requiring to address the issue are quite costly. And so I don't know how much more people can bear in that regard. So, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councilman Binder?
The report you sent was good at given the scope of work, dollar amount. I think, can you speak a little bit about what the annual need is, what our catch-up rate, if anything, that we need for capital projects?
So when we went through a couple years ago and had a consultant come in and look at what was in our work order system, figure out projecting what work would need to take place over the next 10 years, the number was right around, I want to say, between $40, $45 million over that 10 years. So council elected at that time to allocate $4 million a year for the next 10 years towards stormwater. That number is good right now, we're seeing. Where the only pitfall I potentially see coming down the line is if the measures that we need to fix our pipes have the cost still stay as high as they are. I mean, we're not talking a 10 or 20% cost difference. We're talking, in some cases, 75 to 125% cost increase in some areas. So that'd be my biggest concern that we have right now. As we dive deeper and more things get developed and we see more things occurring and there's more of solutions that need to be out there that we start seeing, partnering on projects is going to be key. You look at the Meadowbrook area with Milton, I call it Milton High School, but the Innovation Academy. There are things that we can do partnering with that school for capacity. We're already looking at upstream of that is the log cabin site, as we call it. That is going to be I think it's going to be a fairly good game changer in that area, helping things out. So from a funding cost, as we go through this, the numbers start seeing where they need to be, and construction pricing starts leveling out where they're at. We had a factor of safety in. We should be okay. Now, that's saying year 8 and year 9, I might speak differently, given construction costs, but today we should be okay. There's only so much work the vendors can do too, and there's only so much work, supply material that we can out there to do some of the work.
So that $5 million amount, that's for picking up the backlog plus any kind of what we can expect to see over
Yes.
to,
So what
to
we're
stay up to the date of, keeping the facilities up to date to the level we
correct,
want to
yes,
be.
Yes. We have a long list of projects that are already in the queue. Some of it's being designed in-house, some of it's being designed by vendors. We're also piggybacking on our, which is very important, piggybacking on our T-SPLOS projects. So when we know we have an issue, one of the issues was, that was in the report was Webbridge Road Bridge over Big Creek there. It needed to be replaced. It's being replaced as part of the Webbridge Corridor project with T-SPLOS. So that helps us out. So there's other projects that we're doing that there's work along the pedestrian bridges on Windward Parkway. We're tying into that system as well. So we should be okay.
So I looked at our notes from, I don't know where it came from. I think one of our 2022 retreats or something about stormwater, and then the annual cost was 4.9 listed. So
Some of those numbers, what we did, we approximated the number of catch basins we had in the city. I think
Yep.
the report was at 10,000 catch basins. It's 8,300 from our GIS data. Amount of linear feet of pipes was off by a little bit too, but not much. It was only about maybe 10 miles, I think it was, of pipes difference. But what we also noticed is some of those improvements that they want us to do that were listed in the report, we noticed we never had an issue there. So for example, in that report, in the cost, they wanted us to replace the bridges on Windward Parkway. Well, we never had any flooding issues on Windward Parkway. The analysis said that on a 5-year storm, Windward Parkway floods. We've had plenty of 5-year storms. We have not flooded on Windward Parkway. So we removed some of those projects off of that. So that's how that number came down.
okay,
Because it's not just one bridge on Windward Parkway, there's 4.
just trying to understand that the number's been 4 for the past 2 years when we've dealt with incredible inflation, and on top of that, the inflation of construction is
So what else? Well, so what I can say is
higher.
correct. Our consultants and our contractors have held their pricing on on-call contracts, so that's very good news. Great partnership there. We're also tag teaming on different things. Instead of doing a little project here and there, we're making it a larger project and getting economies of scale and broken down. I'm hoping the $4 million, to be honest with you, will last us. We'll go from there. I'm hoping a lot of our stuff that we took care of the last couple of years are the older, and the older areas are the worst spots.
Yeah.
But you're right. Inflation and different construction costs, it could mean that in year 5 we need to look at $4.5 million potentially.
It's just not matching up with what you've been saying on street repair and other things. And it makes sense that, hey, they're holding good on the price from the project from last year, but that's not going to be a good enough answer next year when they're saying, okay, it's time to pay the market rate.
And so Tom and I have talked a lot about this, about the number.
Yeah.
And you're going to have some years where you're going to pay more, and you have years where you're going to pay less. And we drew the infamous Mendoza line, and that's where the number we worked through. I don't want to say that we need $5 million, $6 million, because that's what the numbers say this year. And 3 years from now, numbers drop down significantly.
Okay. And then on the monitoring, Councilmember Hypes brought up a good point. Like I not empirical, but just visual evidence on my end. I'm on the west side. I have Full Killer Creek in my backyard. I'm on a hill, so it's fine, but it seems like quite a bit more often the flow rate has increased, and you're seeing in the ways it's zigging and zagging. It's changed. Luckily, it's zagging towards the Roswell side of my stream, so I'm happy on that end. But I don't know if that's the case on every one of them.
We took care of you.
So, but what can we do to have a better answer on monitoring on some of those bigger streams?
So we'll start. We're researching heavily into the data collection.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we get the right equipment out there. We'll work with some consultants who say they have the best product for us out there. They all do, and see which ones have been working the best for them, for other municipalities. So we've got some locations that we're looking at going in there. We're also looking at it as part of the partnership. This is a partnership for us. So working with HOAs and working with communities, potentially where we know there could be in somebody's backyard, working with them into some of the structures and finding out what the elevations or what that data, what the flow is. Because the flow is what you're concerned with. That's the flow rate and the velocity of the water coming through the stream, the amount of water and how fast the water is going. That is what we're trying to identify. And the Blue Book, which is the stormwater manual that all the engineers have to design in the state of Georgia around, the big component that's changed over the last couple of years is water has to infiltrate into the ground. That wasn't the past. In the past, it just went into the, just went into the pipe and then went into the detention pond and it went there. Now they have to capture so much of that water, perk into the ground, and then they calculate their runoff. So that is part of what you're seeing some of the older areas where there's more water coming through, because that percolation requirement was not established for those. And your neighborhood and upstream of you basically is that case.
I'd like to hear back as a follow-up on what we can add there, because I think that kind of add the circular error that I hear of, well, it's showing flooding, but we don't have evidence of flooding. So I think if we have the monitoring to show how over a long term that it's not just a weather phenomenon that.
And we define flooding as different than everybody else in some cases. Flooding is the structure. That is where FEMA comes in, and that's what the flooding is. Your backyard floods, has water in it, your structure is fine, that's what we go off of. So yes, some people's backyards are more wet than normal, but everything in construction and engineering and in FEMA is based off of base flood elevation of your house.
Yeah.
Councilman Dorito.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Pete. I thank you and your staff, and also James, and I know Director Cook, I don't think she's here right now, was involved on the front end of these discussions, just stormwater management. Been part of some of those meetings, so you guys have done all of you have done an awesome job in presenting to us tonight. A couple things I just want to make sure that council's fully aware of in all these meetings with the neighborhoods and stuff. Can you speak to the issues that we're trying to figure out how to get around with respect to private property and trying to manage stormwater on private properties, or assisting residents to be able to do that?
Yeah, so a lot of the stormwater, a lot of the pipes, when it comes off, and it comes to our extent of service, we take care of any road water. Any water that's in the right of way that goes into a catch basin goes into a pipe. But once it's discharged from the pipe, it then becomes the owner's responsibility, the private property owner's responsibility. And in some cases, in these older neighborhoods, things have built up. Sediment has come in and it's blocking the flow of water. So we're trying to do what we call, there's 10 feet that we play with, but sometimes 10 feet doesn't work. We're still at a lower elevation than we are 10 feet. So we want to have that positive flow, positive drainage. So we're working with getting easements from property owners. Some are very receptive to us. Some are like, what are you going to pay me? It's a love-hate relationship at sometimes. Our other problem is dealing with the streams and the creeks. They're predominantly in HOA's backyards. In the older communities, it's in private property backyards. In the newer communities, they're in open space. So we don't have the permission or the ability to go into these properties to clean things out, to improve the area. That is a challenge. It's going to have to be more of a partnership, or maybe a policy, or even I don't want to use the word ordinance, probably more of a policy attribute that we can look into.
And that's where the education piece comes into the program you're putting in front of us tonight. You spoke earlier, I guess, the inspection of Zone B, it was you were referring to, and about pipes going between homes and stuff. I'm assuming we still have to maintain those pipes between homes. We have easements for that. That's not private property.
Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
So this is a very standard extent of service diagram that majority of municipalities have adopted. And basically what it shows is runoff coming from the street. public runoff, all public. But if you have a catch basin in your backyard that ties into our pipe system, that is private. That is not collecting, that is collecting private runoff. When it discharges off onto private property, then it becomes private property, the responsibility, as you see down here.
Okay.
So coming out of a outlet control structure is private. The detention pond is private. We basically take care of road runoff and the pipe network associated with that road runoff through the system.
And the $4 million in the budget, I'm just doing this for the record, the rest of the council, from our discussions, is really going to be utilized for public assets, correct? Mainly.
Correct, yes.
We can't use that money to go onto someone's property and correct a flooding situation. But we are looking at ways, correct me if I'm wrong, of potential grant money opportunities or things. You know, we're trying to work that out and figure out if there's options for that or HOAs to kind of help fund some of their improvements that they might need.
Yes, we are looking at funding for grants. We have been unsuccessful to date. A lot of it deals with the matching requirements. Not that we don't have the money for it, but sometimes we could actually do the project quicker than we would actually get the money and help out the benefit sooner, and it costs less in the long run due to the federal requirements. But we're also working with FEMA, trying to figure out, helping out to get that dollar amount threshold improved for some of the communities, because there's a $250,000 threshold. Well, the homes around that are flooding are well excess of $250,000. So we got that things to figure out. But they can write their application. We have talked to homeowners who have asked us for their assistance in writing and understanding the applications at hand. We've provided that assistance to several people who want to apply for flood assistance through FEMA because they have the flood insurance. So there's different avenues that we're going through, but right now we've been unsuccessful on the smaller scale grants.
And one more question.
Yes, sir.
We haven't really discussed this, so you don't have to answer tonight if you don't want to, but is it time to, and maybe, I know you're coordinating with Fulton County, is it time to get the neighboring communities around Alpharetta to participate in a consortium or have representatives that discuss stormwater issues? Because obviously, a lot of the impacts to Alpharetta are coming from outside the city as well, and maybe vice versa.
So
I'm just wondering if there should be improved coordination between the...
I speak to Chris Haggard over at Public Works Director at Johns Creek, Sarah Leaders over at Milton quite often. We have some of our projects adversely impact some of their property owners that we're working some of the solutions to, and vice versa. We are fortunate that a lot of the stuff that drains into Full Killer Creek, drains into Big Creek, so there's not much we can do in those areas, but we are in communication. In fact, Johns Creek was asking us, how do you guys get your pipes lined so quickly? Well, my back lot is their staging lot. They don't have to store materials on a side lot. We work with our vendors to get first dibs, if you want to call it out there. So there are partnerships working through that right now, and have been for years.
Good. The only thing I'll say, Mayor, is a comment on, complimenting this council, the mayor and the council, on funding at the level we decided to do after the study for the 10-year program. I think the last funding in the last fiscal year budget was about $1.2 million, I think, for stormwater management. And it's now at $4 million. So
Yeah, for the last 2 years, it's been 4.
yeah. Well, prior to even the pandemic, I think it was 1.6 million.
Yeah.
But anyway,
So
so that's a significant increase in the city's commitment to addressing these issues. Thank you.
Any other questions or input? This is just a work session. Councilman Binder.
On to Councilmember Dorito's point on our increase, which has been good to the stormwater fee, it went to $4.5 million. Part of that discussion, it came from general fund. Part of that discussion was the stormwater, doing a stormwater fee, or at least a study to do that.
correct.
I guess my concern from a financial liaison is having, I always thought it was a good idea to have it so we could start going now while waiting to study, but it seemed like kind of a stopgap measure to have to put that funding in now through general funds, but the concern would be a shell game of taking money from our general fund towards stormwater, where we could be applying it to other things that are also needed, like facility maintenance on our fire stations. Where are we on a stormwater fee? Is that just kind of stopped, or is it something worth us looking at from a holistic perspective to give you what you need to manage it, but the issue, but also for us as managing our general fund?
I mean, it's additional revenue, and that's one statement. We have a very good idea of how much money would come in based off of our neighboring cities who have stormwater utility fees. I want to say it's between 2.5 and around 2.5 million is what I believe the number is. That's off of that rate. You could always, mayor and council could select a different, higher rate to bring additional revenue in. At the end of the day, it comes down to just a prioritization of our projects. And what we do is we have projects that we know are going to be long-term, and got projects that are going to be short-term. And making sure the dollars that we have every year, we can tackle the necessity of those projects. And we rank them. We do maintenance and pipelining and structure repair at the top. And then we have those other low-hanging fruit projects that we're working on. So a fee, go answer your question, has not progressed. It was not, the study was not funded as part of the capital improvement budget. It is a lengthy process. And what I mean, it's about a year and a half long process to go through the ordinance and everything you need to have it taken care of. I also know there is some accounting requirements associated with it, and what you can or cannot spend the money associated with the fee with. But I do know that mayor and council has been we've been very blessed for the $4 million, because I know that's not what other municipalities are receiving for their stormwater program.
From the general fund?
Correct. They're just getting their funds from the stormwater fee.
What is your peers said, your other public works directors around neighboring cities as far as pros and cons on the stormwater fee?
I think it was last year, Johns Creek, or maybe it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, with their budget process, there was a very big discussion on the stormwater fee. Part of their salaries and benefits of the staff comes out of that fee. Their requirements of what they maintain is a larger area than us. They do end to end. And what I mean is, once the water goes into that pipe, until the water exits the pipe, that's their responsibility. You know, if there's any gaps in between, they take care of those gaps. I'm not for that. I'm for the extent of service that we have listed here that we've adopted. There's pros and cons. I mean, easily, at the end of the day, it comes down to, as engineers and as construction people, we want to just solve the problems. We want to have as much funds as we possibly can to solve the problems that we have out there to fix. And for us, the less red tape, the better. So if it's not embedded and we don't have to have certain pots of money where it could go to, because that's one thing we used to have. We used to have a pipelining account. We used to have a structure account. We used to have a stormwater studies account. And working with finance, we've lumped all that together, because some years we don't need to do a study, and some years we need to spend more money on pipelining. And we budget accordingly. So having it all in one account helps us out, because then we can take care of the emergency that needs to be at hand. But there is a process for a utility fee, or utility to be implemented in the city.
I heard when we did the $5 million, it was good that we did it. But we all know in the general fund, what can happen one year can go away next year or the next iteration of a council.
And that is the plus side. When I hear that is the plus side from my counterparts, is that they know they're getting X amount of dollars every year out of that.
And I have a feeling, a sneaking suspicion, that over the next few years, that as we're talking about $4 million to $5 million in our general fund that we're receiving, and we'd like to hit more 5 to 7, there's going to be some hard decisions to have to be had in the next few years or so. So
No,
I don't know what this council or the future council wants, but it may be good to dust that off and consider it. But that's for everyone else to decide.
Understood.
So if I could, I'd like to address that, since this is something that has been a topic of discussion, just to make sure everyone here understands what is being suggested by Councilman Binder is some of the neighboring communities around us charge fees for stormwater. So it's a tax increase. It's done in Roswell, it's done in Johns Creek, and it charges not only private homeowners, not only businesses, but churches, public schools, any schools, and other nonprofit organizations a fee, homeowners associations, individual property owners. And so the reason that I have not supported doing that is because I think our taxpayers pay enough right now, and that I don't see a need, while it's certainly a tool that could be used if there was a need, as long as I'm comfortable that we're addressing the issue without having to raise taxes, I don't really have any interest in doing that. Now, I'm just one of 7, but I think we're doing a pretty good job of addressing the issues right now. And I don't really see us going to the public and saying, we need a fee. Now, Johns Creek has a much lower millage rate than us. They don't have the homestead exemptions, but they do have a lower millage rate. And so once you net that out, then that might be somewhat reasonable from their perspective compared to the total tax burden that we have. But
Mr. Mayor, I would like to address that. I was by no means suggesting the stormwater fee. I've been pretty used to getting hit with the bully pulpit every once in a while. My concern is that our general fund has been right around 5 million, and what the answer is to get to the 5 to 7 million that we're looking at. And so taking slices of pies of the general funds. But I was looking more for an answer of how we can sustain that cost as our general fund seems to laggard. But
well, in a few minutes, we're going to be discussing an extra $1.8 million from our budgeting process. So it's not like we don't have resources.
I'll save that for the next agenda item.
Any other questions or input? Councilman Mitchell.
Hey, this is related to stormwater in the sense that for 10 years or so, we've been constantly lining our stormwaters with the it's almost like putting a Band-Aid on the pipe in hopes that the corrosion won't take place. But my concern is that when are we going to, and how much of the pipe are we going to have to dig up and replace, and how much of that are we already doing? What percentage are we replacing each year instead of lining?
It's minimal, but I'll get you the right information on that one. I know we do a lot more lining than we do replacing.
We do, and my big concern is it's costly to replace the pipe each year, and we've been lining for a long time.
Yeah. So
And that pipe only lasts for so many years, even when you're lining the interior of it. At some point, the corrosion gives way. And what kind of shape are we in as a city? I don't want to get into the semantics of whether there's a fee, and at some point, we may have to address that, but it's a lot more costly to dig it up and to replace it and things like that. And thank God we've been able to do the lining for so long. Yeah. And I hope we'll continue to, but we do need to know those numbers.
Yeah, I'll get you those numbers. And the life expectancy in the lining. I want to say it's 30 years for the lining, but I want to verify such.
And we need a fair assessment of most of the pipe, what age is it, how long has it been in there, and how many linear miles of that particular pipe has been in the ground, as best you can ascertain.
I could pretty much tell you what it will be for when we have the final plats, but a lot of the stuff that we inherited from Fulton County will be more of a wag, to be brutally honest. Because we just don't have we don't have a lot of the data from when exactly some sections were built. But we could get into it. Within about 5 years, we could have a number.
Okay. Thank
on
you.
the age. Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll most definitely take care of that.
All right, thank you.
Is there anything else? We've got about 11 minutes before we have our city council meeting, so if there's nothing else we need to talk about in this work session, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item under the work session, which is the tax digest and millage rate levy. Thank you for your help, Pete.
Thank you.
Mr. Lagerbloom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council. I was going to make an introduction tonight and then hand this over to Tom Harris. As you look at the audience, you don't see a Tom Harris. He was traveling back from, I believe, the Northeast and got stuck in Asheville, North Carolina. So we're hoping that we see him by tomorrow. I'll do the best I can do with this item. I think we probably make a couple of decisions tonight, or you give some direction, but I think this comes back a week from now when the balance of the council is present to make some decisions, when those that are not in the room tonight are here to be a part of that discussion. Let me just start this item by telling you that we do have a lawfully adopted budget. We went through the process that we always do, which is to set the millage rate, to adopt a budget, to move forward. Because of our fiscal year being July to June, we're always in that bit of a catch-22 where our budget has to be adopted before we know what the digest is going to tell us from the county. So we do the best we can based upon the past in anticipating what the future would hold. And this year we were ultra conservative, and when we got the numbers in from the tax digest, it actually showed about a 10.7% increase, which balanced against what that was last year was about a 5% increase. What this means is that there are additional dollars anticipated to come to the city of Alpharetta that could be used in the general fund. But when we set the millage rate, there's a certain level of error that we can be within to not have to do it again and just adjust it administratively. We are outside of that level of error, which is 3%, which is why I emailed you, and we need to redo what we did, which is to go through the process of holding the 3 public hearings again on the new millage rate, and we'll do that at 2 meetings in August. What I'm bringing before you tonight is generally a discussion on what your first reaction is to that additional revenue in the budget. We have to advertise for those public hearings 2 days from now, which is why they have fallen in the sequence that they have in August. But the takeaway that I will get hopefully from you tonight is if you certainly would have the latitude to make an investment into capital projects, you'd have the latitude as a council to invest in costs that would recur to the city. And you'd even have the opportunity, if you chose to as a city council, to say, that's extra revenue in the budget, let's figure out what the rollback millage rate would be and return those dollars to the taxpayers. I published with the agenda item, and I did it on purpose, both a list of unfunded recurring projects as well as unfunded capital projects, just to show you that a very significant argument can be made that we should take those dollars and invest them into things that the community will see as investments. We've talked about, and I won't go through a laundry list now, but we've talked about knowing that we have deferred maintenance in some of our facilities, and it's one thing to design what the new facility could look like going forward. It's another to actually pull the trigger and get that work done so that we actually have something tangible. We certainly have public works projects that deal with infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, bridges. We can go down the list of things. I'm not asking you to necessarily prioritize that tonight, because I think you'll want to think about that and probably have all 7 here. But the general feedback I'm looking for tonight is whether or not you have interest exploring further what a rollback and a redistribution would be of the $1.8 million to the community, because that will alter the advertising that we have to do 2 days from now. So if you say, Chris, we really think that there's significant and continue to be significant things that we could make as investments in the community, that's good feedback. I would take that and act upon it. Or if you have other feedback for me tonight. That's number 1, why we're here, and 2, what I hope we accomplish in these next couple of minutes before we have to get to our evening meeting.
And once again, this is just a work session. This isn't going to be held to a vote as a business item or anything. And just ask that as you ask questions and give input, that we keep in mind we've only got about 7 minutes left. So we'll have other opportunities, but if you can be concise, I would appreciate it as well. Anyone want to make a comment or a question? Councilman Biner.
When you say deferred maintenance, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is I think we're going to learn that there's maintenance that is lagging in some of our oldest fire stations, and that's the use of the word deferred, is that it just probably should have been done by now, and we're playing a little bit of catch-up. Certainly doable, but that's the context of the word.
I'm all in favor of us moving forward with the adjusted budget. The things that have kept me up over the past couple of years is how we're going to pay for our hopes and dreams on the North Point system with the road diet that we have. We don't have funds there. Lots of hopes that we'll get there. And then what really woke me up, and I think a lot of us, and was pretty scary, is the fact that we didn't know about this deferred issue on the fire stations. And so it came as a surprise when they asked for the studies. It's probably going to be, I don't know, over $1 million to quite a bit more for all the fire stations. So I'd put the money towards that. And that goes back to my point on there is when we play a little shell game of putting towards one thing that we need and not having for the other. So I think that fire station is a good example of what's been deferred on that. So I hope we can maybe not expand our scope of adding to the capital list, but putting towards those things we need to do and things that we've already committed to, like North Point.
Thank you.
Councilman Heights?
I echo Councilman Binder's approach, and it seems like every year during the budget process, we fund what we can, and then there's a cutoff, and some of those items remain on the cutoff list year over year. And so it's not exactly found money. We've wisely spent the money we had available, and now there's additional funds to address those things. I am curious, we've all been more or less very complimentary of how you did the budget process, bringing the directors together and sorting through the respective priorities. And council has this ultimate decision about how this money should be dealt with and spent, but I would be curious to know, coming out of those budget discussions with the directors, what were the things that were right on the bubble that didn't quite make their way in here into the budget, so that when the directors were talking about things of immediate need, we find out where that cutoff is. That'd be an additional piece of information I might want to consider. And we may come up with something that wasn't right on the bubble amongst the discussion of the directors. But I'm just looking for, like the North Point project that you brought up, and you may have had some things come out of your discussion.
We did, and if you'll allow me to, if we're going to bring this back at another workshop next week, I'll prepare a list for you and distribute it in advance of what was close that just didn't quite get over the finish line.
Any other thoughts from council? Councilman Mitchell?
I'd also like to see that list. I know that we said we'd focus on the 2 fire stations to begin with. If we could add a third, or roughly a third, I'd love to do that. And also, if we could do a little more on the North Point feature there, that would be great. And also, I know that we were making progress over on with the corporate area off of Webb Bridge. That would be good as well, because we've seen some economic development opportunity there that started and very much in process. So if we could start that so that we could show that there's some movement there, that would be good. Thank you.
Great. I just want to make sure I clarify one thing. Are you referring to Brookside?
I'm sorry, I meant to say Brookside.
Brookside,
yes.
okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Councilman Dorito, any thoughts? I think there's been some good suggestions and different items pointed out. My only input would be that I do think, since we did not have enough money to meet the needs specifically on maintenance and capital projects, that if we're going to spend that money as a revised budget, we spend it on capital projects, whether it's the sewers at Webb Bridge Road or the sewer line at Webb Bridge Road or the fire stations. I support most of those projects as being in a priority that just didn't get funded because we didn't know that those were the revenues we'd have available. So that being said.
Sounds good. I've got the direction I need for tonight, so that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I'm assuming we do not have an executive session that we're going to try to adjourn to?
We'll do it after the evening meeting.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this work session. Give us just a quick moment, and then we'll kick right back into gear for our city council meeting. Thank you, everyone.